The first winter rain drizzled down Burnside Avenue, reflecting the faint red glow of cafes and flickering neon signs, like shards of half-forgotten memories. Angela Thompson pulled her worn coat tighter, clutching a paper bag filled with discounted food she had just bought from Safeway. The air was thick with the scent of rain bread and the metallic dampness of the city, a smell only those who've lived long in hardship can grow used to. Her 7-year-old daughter Sophie skipped along the puddles, her shoes soaked, laughing freely. "Mom, is it going to snow soon?" Angela smiled faintly. "Not yet, sweetheart. Maybe next week." As they crossed the supermarket's exit, a tall man in a gray wool coat and polished black shoes stepped out, phone pressed to his ear, his deep, precise voice carrying the tone of someone used to making decisions. He moved too quickly to notice the small object that slipped from his pocket and landed softly among the raindrops. "Sophie, don't run off." Before Angela could finish, Sophie bent down and picked up a dark brown leather wallet with hand-stitched edges. "Mom, someone dropped this." Angela reached out to stop her, but Sophie was already running toward the man, standing beside a sleek black Tesla parked by the curb. "Sir, you dropped this?" The man turned. Their eyes met brief fleeting, yet enough to make Angela pause. His gaze was cold and deep, as if every flash of lightning in the rain was drawn into it. He looked at the child, then at Angela. "Thank you," he said, his voice low and smooth like aged bourbon. Taking the wallet, he pulled a $20 bill from his coat and handed it to Sophie. "Here for being honest." "No, thank you," Angela said quickly, shielding her daughter. She didn't do it for money. She just wanted to return it. Surprise flickered in his eyes. He pressed his lips together, then tucked the wallet away. His gaze lingering on her slender hands marked with faint scars, the kind left by surgical tools. "Thank you. Not many parents still teach their children that." He nodded politely, then turned and got into the car. The door closed. The quiet hum of the electric engine faded into the rain. Angela stood still for a few seconds. Sophie looked up, eyes bright. "Mom, that man looked like someone from a movie." Angela smiled faintly. "Maybe. But don't believe everything you see in movies, okay?" 3 days later. The phone rang non-stop as Angela stitched a hunting dog's shoulder wound. The screen read Memorial Health Finance. She hesitated, another debt call, she thought. But the voice on the line sounded different. "Hello, Ms. Thompson. This is the Beacon Foundation. We're informing you that your husband's medical debt at Memorial has been fully cleared. Your account was selected as one of 12 families for this month's debt forgiveness program." Angela froze. "Cleared? Completely?" "Yes, ma'am. You'll receive an official confirmation letter this week. Congratulations." The call ended. Under the harsh fluorescent light, her reflection in the metal table stared back, stunned. $47,000 of hospital debt gone. No explanation. No reason. She stood there until the dog whimpered softly, grounding her again. Her hands trembled as she tied the final suture. But in her mind, only one question echoed. Who did this? And why? That night, Portland felt colder than usual. The wind carried damp air from the Willamette River, slapping against the faces of late commuters. Angela sat in her small third-floor apartment, staring out the rain-streaked window. Sophie was asleep, clutching her threadbare stuffed rabbit. The room was quiet except for the old debt notice on the table lying there like a ghost that refused to fade. Her tea had gone cold. She opened her laptop and typed Beacon Foundation, Oregon. The website appeared, a medical and educational assistance fund, sponsored by Martinez Dynamics. The name made her chest tighten. Martinez. The man from that day? She closed the page immediately, as if looking any longer would pull her into something she couldn't control. The next morning, a black SUV parked across the street while Sophie was walking to school. A man in his 50s, wearing a suit, stepped out and approached her politely. "Excuse me, Ms. Thompson. My name is Noah Briggs, and I represent Mr. Christopher Martinez. He wishes to speak with you at your convenience. Now or whenever suits you best." Angela stepped back slightly. What? About the medical debt that was paid off, and perhaps a few partnership opportunities. I assure you, everything is completely transparent. She looked at Sophie, then at the luxury car a few meters away, where behind the tinted glass, the outline of a man sat quietly, posture, calm, gaze unreadable. Even in daylight, he exuded the composure that made others uncertain whether to fear or trust him. Angela hesitated. "I have nothing to discuss. Tell him I'm grateful, but don't owe anyone a favor." Noah nodded and reached into his coat pocket. "Then please allow me to leave this with you. Just a letter, no contracts, no money, no conditions." She accepted it without understanding why. When the SUV drove away, her palm was still warm. Inside the envelope was a single white sheet of paper with neat handwriting in black ink. "No one can erase another's past debts, Angela, but sometimes we can help them begin again from zero. CM." Angela read the note repeatedly, unsure whether to feel moved or afraid. CM Christopher Martinez. The name was everywhere in the news. 38-year-old billionaire founder of the West Coast's largest medical cloud network, listed in Forbes 30 under 30 at 29. A man like that, why would he remember a small-town veterinarian? Late that night, after another long shift, Angela returned home. At her door lay another envelope sealed neatly with clear tape. No sender, only 2 handwritten words. For Angela. Inside was a new eviction notice payment due within 6 days and a second handwritten note printed on a law firm's letterhead. "If you require legal representation, please get in touch with Ava Kendall, Martinez and Price Law Office. Fees fully waived." Angela crushed the paper in her hand, her breathing uneven. She didn't know if this was kindness concern or the beginning of a web slowly closing around her. She looked inside at Sophie sleeping peacefully under the soft yellow light. "Sweetheart," she whispered, "I think Mommy's standing at a crossroads. She's not ready for." Outside, Portland's rain returned. Amid the steady rhythm of falling drops, Angela heard faint footsteps in the hallway, slow, deliberate, eerily familiar. She opened the door, catching only the shadow of a man disappearing around the stairwell corner. The corridor light glinted off the wet floor, stretching into a long, wavering trail. Angela shivered. She couldn't tell if it was fear or something more complicated. If this story touched your heart, follow the channel to enjoy many more heart-stirring stories every week. That morning in Portland was beautiful in a contradictory way. The sky was pale blue, the sunlight just warm enough to fool people into thinking winter had retreated, yet mist still blanketed the Willamette River, a quiet reminder that peace is often only temporary. Angela stood in the clinic, pulling the straps of her mask tighter as Dr. Randall Pierce's flat voice came from behind her. "Ms. Thompson," he said mechanically. "Just got an email from a local paper. They're asking about the veterinarian whose debt was erased by Martinez Dynamics. I think you owe me an explanation." Angela looked up, her heartbeat quickening. "I don't know where they got that information. I never—" "That's not the point," he interrupted, adjusting his glasses. "The issue isn't what you did. You became the story. I can't have the clinic's reputation dragged into media noise. Take a week off, unpaid." The words landed like stones. Angela wanted to argue, but stopped herself. She only exhaled, peeled off her gloves, and folded them neatly. She knew too well dignity is always the easiest thing for others to take away when you're poor. The clinic door shut behind her, and the bell jingle sounded almost mocking. The third-floor apartment was bathed in cold sunlight. Sophie sat at the table, coloring a picture of a house with a garden, a dream. Angela couldn't bring herself to promise. "Mom, can I draw a fish pond too?" "Sure, sweetheart, as long as your fish can swim in the air," she replied, smoothing her daughter's hair with a small laugh. But her mind was a mess. She had to find a way to pay rent. She had to hold on to her pride before a man named Christopher Martinez turned his kindness into a debt she could never repay. Then the phone rang. A gentle female voice came through. "Hello, this is Ava Kendall, attorney for the Beacon Foundation. I'm calling on behalf of Mr. Martinez regarding the cleared medical debt. I need to confirm you received the notice correct." "Yes," Angela replied, keeping her tone even. "Good. I'd also like to invite you to our office in Lake Oswego to complete a few verification documents. It's not a legal obligation, just for transparency." Angela hesitated. "Your office? As in Mr. Martinez's?" "The Foundation's office?" Ava corrected softly. "He'll be present, but only as the founder. You're welcome to bring your daughter if you wish." Angela wanted to say no, but then she glanced at the overdue bills stacked on the counter and sighed. "All right, I'll come tomorrow." The Beacon Foundation office sat inside a glass building overlooking Oswego Lake, reflecting a silver-gray sky. Everything smelled of oak wood and freshly ground coffee, refined yet understated, the luxury that made her feel even more out of place. "Ms. Thompson, this way, please." Ava Kendall, a poised woman in her early 30s with chestnut hair and sharp, intelligent eyes, led Angela into a small meeting room. There, Christopher Martinez stood by the window facing the lake. No designer suit, just a white shirt with sleeves rolled up the faint scar on his left wrist, visible a rare imperfection on an otherwise immaculate man. "Thank you for coming," he said, turning toward her. His gaze met hers calm, but with an undercurrent of something electric. "I know this situation must be uncomfortable. I don't want you to feel hurt. I want to fix a small piece of what's wrong with the world." "This world is full of wrongs, Mr. Martinez." Angela replied, her tone dry. "If you plan to fix them all, you'll need more than a lifetime." He smiled faintly. "I'm trying. And yesterday I heard you were suspended from your clinic media trouble, right?" Angela froze. "Who told you that news travels faster than I expect?" "I have friends in the veterinary field," he said casually, as though his network of influence was a fact of nature. "You didn't deserve that. I could recommend you to another facility." "Willamette Vet Care. They're looking for a surgeon with emergency experience. How long do you plan to keep helping me, Mr. Martinez?" Angela's eyes flashed. "You cleared my debt, hired a lawyer, now you're finding me a job. What do you want from me?" The silence between them grew thick. Christopher studied her for a long moment before replying quietly, "I want you to be free. And I want to understand why your eyes always look like they're running from something." The words stopped her cold. She didn't know why, but for a moment she felt seen. The meeting ended quickly. Ava walked Angela to the door, handing her a small folder and an envelope. "You can refuse, but I think you should look." Mr. Martinez wanted to make sure Sophie had full health coverage. Angela opened it. Inside was an approved Oregon State child health insurance form, already signed by the sponsor, Christopher Martinez. She stared at the elegant signature, feeling it cut through her pride like a clean blade. That evening, Angela told Paige Carter, her college friend, over drinks at a dim bar near the hospital, where the yellow lights softened even the most brutal truths. "Listen," Paige said pragmatically, "he's not some criminal. Martinez is known for real philanthropy. Maybe it's just a coincidence." "Coincidence," Angela laughed wearily. 3 days after I return, a lost wallet, my debt disappears. A lawyer calls, then a new job falls out of the sky. If that's a coincidence, the universe has a twisted sense of humor." Paige watched her quietly. "Are you afraid of him?" "No," Angela murmured. "I'm afraid I might start being grateful to him." The next morning, as Angela walked Sophie to school, she saw the familiar black SUV parked nearby. The window rolled down. Christopher sat in the back seat, coffee cup in hand, calm as if they were two old acquaintances. "You shouldn't be walking in this cold," he said as she approached. "Let me give you both a ride to school and to work, that's all." "I don't want my daughter getting used to strangers driving her," she replied firmly. "Strangers?" His brow arched, a faint smile at his lips. "After everything, you still think I'm a stranger? You've never told me anything about yourself, except that you have money." "And you've never asked," he said softly. Angela turned to walk away, but Sophie tugged her sleeve. "Mom, that's the man from the other day. The one who dropped his wallet." Christopher bent down to meet the girl's eyes, his tone gentle. "Hello again, little honesty hero." Sophie tilted her head. "Do you have a dog, I do?" "A Labrador named Milo. He's lazier than I am." She giggled. Angela stood still, realizing his voice with children was entirely different, warm, real. "Come on," he said quietly. "Get in, before the rain returns." Angela hesitated. Then she let Sophie climb into that SUV for the first time. The road from downtown Portland to the suburbs stretched beneath rain-damp trees. The car filled with soft instrumental jazz, so faint it felt like a breath. Christopher drove sunlight sketching shadows across his face, the face of a man carrying a loss too profound to name. "You live in Lake Oswego?" Angela asked softly. "Yes, a house by the lake, 15 minutes from here. But I'm there only on weekends." "And your family gone," he said. She turned, slightly wanting to ask more, but his gaze stayed forward, steady, locked like a door long sealed. When they arrived, Sophie waved. "Bye, Mr. Christopher." Angela pressed her lips together. "You shouldn't let her get that familiar." "Why not?" "Because it makes things too close." "And that scares you?" he asked. She didn't answer. He leaned over, placing a folder on the seat between them. "Inside is Willamette Vet Care's offer. They've scheduled your interview for tomorrow. I only made the introduction, the rest is up to your skill." Angela opened the file. Everything was real, the seal, the signatures, the details. She didn't know whether to thank him or be angry. "Why are you doing all this?" "Because I owe myself the chance to help someone without wanting anything back." His eyes grew distant. "I once lost someone who believed there was still good in this world. Maybe I'm trying to prove her right." Angela said nothing, but she heard the sorrow beneath his voice, too genuine to be rehearsed. That night, an email confirmed her interview. The final line read, "Referred by Mr. Christopher Martinez." Paige called moments later. "Angela, listen. My department head says Martinez is under investigation conflict of interest with the Beacon Foundation. There's talk of a priority list of people receiving special treatment. You're on it." Angela's breath caught. "Investigation. It's not public yet. But the Oregon Post is digging. If it breaks, your name will be on the front page and he'll... Pretender he never knew me." Angela finished trembling. She didn't sleep that night. The rain tapping against her window matched the frantic rhythm of a heart one step behind disaster. The next morning, she opened her door and froze. A small bouquet wrapped in brown craft paper sat on the step. Between the yellow tulips was a handwritten note. "I can't stop the world from talking, but I can stand with you if you'll let me. C.M." Angela stood there for a long time. Between rumors and kindness, between being watched and being cared for, she no longer knew what was real. From upstairs, Sophie's voice called down. "Mom, who sent the flowers?" Angela looked up at the silver-gray sky. Maybe someone trying to apologize for making things complicated. That afternoon, she went to the interview. The Willamette Vet Care office sat in a quiet suburb, its glass walls gleaming the familiar scent of antiseptic, making her feel oddly safe. The interview went well. The director said Mr. Martinez was right. "You've got rare emergency skills. We need someone like you." Angela smiled politely, though unease churned inside. She knew somewhere out there that man was still watching, adjusting every piece of her life, like moves in a carefully plotted game. And then, as she walked out to the parking lot, her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "If you want to know why he chose you, come to the Oswego Lake Pier tonight at 7. Don't bring anyone, no name, no signature, just words cold as the lake breeze." Angela stood motionless. The wind carried the faint scent of tulips fading in memory. For the first time, she wondered, do miracles ever exist? Or are they just another way people interfere with fate? And as the sun sank behind the trees, Angela knew whoever had sent that message, she would go. Because her greatest fear was no longer Christopher Martinez, but the truth he was hiding. The wind off Oswego Lake blew head-on, carrying the chill of the water and the damp scent of wood from the steps leading down to the dock. The sky was a mute gray, as if someone had switched off the day's colors. Lakeside lights spilled onto the surface, each wavering streak like a slender thread, binding the real to the unreal. Angela stood there with her hands buried deep in her coat pockets, eyes following the thick fog spreading across the water. 7 o'clock sharp. The text had told her to come, don't bring anyone. She hadn't told Paige, and she hadn't called the police. Partly out of fear, primarily out of curiosity. Maybe deep down she wanted to believe the sender was Christopher Martinez. He had something to say, something to explain, or more dangerously, something he wanted her to understand in a way no letter could carry. A figure appeared at the head of the pier, tall, broad-shouldered, a charcoal overcoat. He walked toward her, each step unhurried yet decisive, as if the ground beneath him had always been his. "You came," he said, voice low, just firm enough not to be carried off by the wind. "Were you the one who sent the message?" Angela asked, leaning back a fraction, guarded. "No." He shook his head and scanned the area. I got a similar message told me to meet here. Someone wanted us to see each other. Just not the usual way. Angela frowned. Someone with a reason to split apart what they can't control. He paused, looking straight at her. Do you trust me? Angela hesitated. Reflections on the lake made his gray eyes harder to read cold on the surface, yet holding something more profound like a current that refused to die. I don't know, she said honestly, but it seems you know more than you're saying. Christopher was silent. He took a thin envelope from his coat and placed it in her hand. This is a partial copy of the investigation file into the Beacon Foundation. I didn't want you dragged in, but they've already used your name. The Oregon Post goes live on Monday. They're saying you're my personally favored case. Cold from the paper seeped into her skin. She opened it and saw her photo taken in secret crossing the street with Sophie. Beneath it, a caption read, "The woman who made Christopher Martinez break his own ethics." Oh God, she breathed. They've been following me, not just you. His voice roughened. They're watching your daughter. I've increased security around your building since last week. Angela's head snapped up. What did you say? You put people on me, protection, not surveillance, he corrected. I only wanted to make sure no one touched Sophie. What gives you the right to decide that? Angela clenched the envelope. You helped me, and I'm grateful. That doesn't make me your responsibility. No, Christopher said slowly. It makes you someone I can't leave unguarded. For a heartbeat, even the wind seemed to be still. Angela turned away, afraid of what she might find in her own eyes, a stirring of sympathy, a moment of wavering. I don't need pity, she said quietly. And I don't pity you, he answered. I respect you. Maybe that's the one thing I still know how to do, right? He stepped closer. His breath carried mint and rain. Angela, you think I'm a controller. I'm trying to do the opposite hand, the choice is back to you. Choices? She let out a brittle laugh, unable to hide the bitterness. All week, I've done nothing but chase whatever you set up the job, the insurance, the lawyer, now bodyguards. You call that freedom? Christopher studied her for a long time. Then softly, then let me fix it. He pulled out his phone and typed quickly. I'm ordering my people to stand down. From this moment, you and your daughter are completely on your own. I'm out. He pocketed the phone, his tone unnervingly calm. That's what you want, isn't it? Angela didn't answer. Something tightened in her throat. When he turned to go, each footfall on the planks sounded heavy, as if he laid down something unspeakable with every step. Christopher! She called after him without meaning to. He stopped and glanced back, a wan smile on his lips. You don't have to say anything. I understand. Then he left, and she remained on the empty pier, still gripping the envelope, her heart pounding with a feeling she couldn't name. That night, Angela went home. The small apartment was quiet streetlight slanting through the blinds. Sophie was asleep, arms around her stuffed rabbit. Angela sat at the table and opened the file again. Between the cold lines about personal involvement and conflict of interest, she found a note tucked inside in Christopher's familiar slanting hand. Let them make it up if they want to write our story. The truth Angela only needs the two of us to know. She read the sentence over and over. Somehow her tears fell and blurred the ink. By morning, Portland was raining again. Angela took Sophie to school with a leaden heart and stopped short at the gate. The black SUV wasn't at its usual corner. An odd emptiness crept in. At the new clinic, a call came from Ava Kendall. Angela, I need to see you. It's important about the Beacon Foundation. An hour later, they sat in a cafe downtown. Ava opened her laptop to an internal email that had just leaked. Someone inside the foundation sent data to the press. They want proof that Mr. Martinez favored you. But there's something strange. Ava frowned. Your debt forgiveness isn't on the list he approved. The signatory is Charlotte Martinez Price, his sister. Angela went still. So that means... It means he wasn't the one who authorized your case. He knew, and he stayed quiet. Maybe to keep you out of the spotlight and avoid clashing with his sister. Either way, it's more complicated than you think. Angela leaned back, mind spinning through contradictions. She'd been angry at him for pulling strings. Now she felt a sting of regret for doubting a man who might have been shouldering blame for someone else. "Charlotte Martinez," she repeated. "What does she want from me?" Ava hesitated. "I know she runs most of the family's philanthropy. Helping you may not be pure charity. Rumor is she wants to prove her brother has gone soft over a woman so she can regain control of the group." Angela fell into a long silence. The crack that had formed in her trust widened under the weight. Near dusk, Angela returned home in the rain. On the stairwell, she heard voices in the hall. At the landing, she saw Christopher's coat, soaked dark hair wet outside her door. His eyes were tired steady. "I need to talk," he said, stepping in before she could invite him. "About my sister." Angela opened the door wider. The yellow lamp painted the small room's patchy walls in warm light. Sophie slept in the bedroom, her breathing even. "What did Charlotte do?" Angela asked. "She used my name to push your file through," Christopher said, voice low. "That's why the press has leverage. I knew and kept quiet. Thought I could handle it internally. But Charlotte isn't just smearing you. She wants to prove I'm not ruthless enough to lead. And now he exhaled. It's out of control. You're being placed at the center of a power game you never chose." Angela clasped her hands. "I'm tired of being dragged into your world. I want to raise my daughter in peace." "I know." Christopher stepped closer, his gaze gentling. "And I swear I'll stop. But before I pull back, I must ask you one thing. What have you ever thought even once that between us, there might be something more than gratitude?" The question cut through Angela's last layer of armor. She took a step back, unsure how to answer. "I don't know," she whispered. "I don't have room for that in my life." "Then let me make room," he murmured. Eyes never leaving hers, only a breath separated them. Angela heard her own heart racing. She should push him away and say this was wrong, that they came from two different worlds. But she couldn't when he leaned in, his voice lost in the rain against the window. Just a kiss, light as a touch deep enough to hush the room. After a few seconds, Angela opened her eyes. Her breath tangled. "You shouldn't have done that." "I know," he said with a rough, quiet laugh. "But I've never managed to do the right thing when my heart refused." He stepped back, took his coat, and stood in the doorway. "I'm leaving Portland for a while. I'll return when it's calmer if you allow it." Angela watched him go, a storm inside her. When the door closed, the air still smelled of mint and rain. She should have felt relieved. Instead, a new emptiness opened, one already carrying the outline of Christopher Martinez, like a trace that can't be erased on Oswego Lake's surface in a wind-bruised night. Monday morning, Portland woke to a storm of news. Wind swept through streets still heavy with mist, tossing freshly printed papers, whose front pages screamed, "The woman who made Billionaire Martinez." Break his principles, the untold story of Angela Thompson. Angela stared at the paper, lying crooked on the reception desk at Willamette Vet Care, her hands gone cold. The article was everywhere on social media. Photos of her and Sophie shot secretly outside the school gate flooded phone screens. Below them were vicious comments. "She knows how to pick a target. Nobody helps for nothing. A modern fairy tale where the prince is the fool." Angela switched off her phone, a weight pressing on her chest. Everything she had tried to protect, peace, dignity work, was now shards tossed into the crowd's open mouth. "Are you all right?" came Dr. Miller's voice behind her, the clinic director. Angela forced a smile. "I don't know. Probably not." "The press will come here. I can't let the clinic become their focal point," he said gently but firmly. "Take a few days off. I'll keep your position if things calm down." Angela didn't blame him. She understood. In this country, when cameras point at someone, everyone else learns to step out of the frame. She walked out of the clinic and into the fine rain. The cold wind stung her face. Across the street, two reporters set up a camera, eyes fixed on her. Angela pulled up her hood and quickened her pace. But a man called out, "Ms. Thompson, any comment on rumors you're living with Mr. Martinez? Is he really paying for your daughter's private school?" Angela spun around. "Enough. I'm not a puppet for you to invent stories and farm clicks." The reporter didn't budge. "If you don't deny it, the public has the right to speculate." A car horn cut through the air. The familiar black SUV pulled up, hugging the curb. The door opened, and Noah Briggs stepped out, his gaze sharp as a blade. "Ms. Thompson, get in," he said quietly, "before this gets out of hand." Angela hesitated, then glanced around. The street was stirring, passers-by lifting phones to record. She knew she had no choice. The SUV rolled out of downtown through thickening rain. No one spoke the entire drive. When the car stopped, Angela realized they were in Lake Oswego, outside the lakeside estate where she'd been only once to see Christopher. The iron gate swung open, the car gliding onto a stone driveway glazed with water. Inside it was warm, scented faintly with pine. A wall of windows looked out on the lake, grayed by rain. Angela had barely slipped off her coat when Charlotte Martinez Price entered. Early 40s, elegant with a calm face and eyes that cut like glass. "Finally, we meet Angela," she said, her voice light with steel beneath. "My brother's in Seattle, but I thought we should talk now before the press ruins everything." Angela stood straight. "If this is about the article, I'm not involved. I'm not using anyone." Charlotte smiled the smile of someone who's heard too many justifications. "I believe you. The public doesn't. And as the executive director of the Beacon Foundation, I have to protect our reputation. Even if that means revising a few narratives." Revising, Angela frowned. "Yes, we can state you were a routine beneficiary. No personal connection to Christopher. If you sign this acknowledgement, the media will soon lose interest." Angela looked at the paper she held, each line pre-written as impersonal as a sentence. "And if I refuse?" Charlotte lifted a shoulder. "Then the story goes another way. Maybe they'll say you received cash. Maybe they'll find someone who saw you at my brother's house. The press doesn't need the truth." "Angela, only a rumor." Silence settled over the room. Rain on the windows sounded like a racing pulse. Angela met the woman's eyes. "I won't sign," she said. "I won't make myself a liar to shield someone else's reputation." Charlotte's smile thinned. "Brave. Like people who think being right is enough. And you," Angela replied softly, "sound like someone who believes power can erase anything." The air between them tightened. Charlotte stood and stepped closer, her voice lower. "You don't understand, Ms. Thompson. Christopher once lost everything because he let his heart lead. I won't let that happen again. He's not a child, and I'm not the cause of his tragedy." Angela said, her voice unsteady but firm. "If you truly care about your brother, let him choose the person who gives him peace." Charlotte studied her a moment longer, then turned away. "You have no idea you're playing with fire." Angela left the estate in heavy rain. On the drive back, her head spun. Between Christopher's kindness, Charlotte's threats, and the public's pressure, she felt wedged between worlds that weren't hers. That night, after Sophie fell asleep, Angela opened her laptop and began to write. Not to defend herself, but to tell the truth. A long, plain-spoken post on her page titled, "I owe gratitude to no one, except to life for letting me be a mother." She wrote about years of work losing her husband to illness, drowning in medical debt, and then receiving forgiveness like hundreds of others. She didn't name Christopher. She mentioned only a stranger who believed kindness needs no repayment. The post spread quickly. The steady, honest tone moved readers. Comments began to shift. "She doesn't sound like a user." Sometimes kindness just needs to be seen for what it is. By morning, Angela's inbox was overflowing messages from old friends, strangers, and single mothers, thanking her for speaking our hearts. Among them was a shorter note from a masked address she instantly recognized. "Your post silenced the entire board. I'm proud of you." See, Angela reread it, lips pressed together, tears threatening for reasons she couldn't name. That afternoon, Paige dropped by with a bag of pastries. "You know your post is all over Twitter, right? They're calling you the woman who dared to say no to money." Angela smiled faintly. "And you, any news on Martinez?" "He hasn't come back to Portland, but internal chatter says he just shot down his sister's proposal in a Seattle meeting. Exact words, 'If kindness requires conditions, it's not kindness.'" Angela went still. The sentence, simple as it was, felt like an answer to everything left unsaid on that rainy night at the pier. That night, Portland was hushed. Angela sat by the window and watched city lights skim the thin veil of rain. She didn't know if tomorrow would be gentler. But she wasn't afraid of the future for the first time in years. In her coat pocket, Christopher's note still rested, the ink slightly blurred. "The truth only needs the two of us to know." She smiled softly. Maybe amid media tempests and careful schemes, the only untouched was what she and he had reached, unnamed, unacknowledged, but real. Outside, the rain thinned to a stop. A breeze off Oswego Lake carried damp wood and a trace of mint, just like the night he first stepped into her life. Angela closed her eyes. In the soft dark, she could almost hear his whisper. "I promised I'd come back when it's quiet." And she waited. Not with longing, but with the slender faith that sometimes what's most true only needs to exist quietly between two people who have weathered the same storm. After 3 relentless days, Portland's rain stopped, leaving the air crisp and damp. A pale gray sky stretched over the old rooftops, reflected in the bus window beside Angela. She pressed her palm lightly to the glass, feeling the cold seep into her fingertips. It had been nearly 2 weeks since Christopher left, and the city seemed to move slowly. She still went to the clinic every morning, walked Sophie to school, and ended by the cafe on Beacon Street for her usual low-foam cappuccino. Everything looked normal, yet inside she felt a strange emptiness. Sometimes while scrubbing in for surgery, she would suddenly pause under the stream of water and hear his voice in her head. "If kindness comes with conditions, it isn't kindness." Oddly, that sentence returned whenever the ground beneath her felt unsteady. One afternoon at the end of the month, Ava Kendall, the attorney who had represented the Beacon Foundation, called unexpectedly. "Angela, I need to see you. It's about Sophie, and I'd rather you hear it from me before you hear it from someone else." Angela stiffened. "What about Sophie?" "Come to my office. 4 o'clock. I'll explain." Ava's voice was calm, but something beneath it made Angela uneasy. The firm's offices were in a glass tower along the Willamette. When Angela stepped in, Ava stood by the window holding a file. Beside the desk was a tall man in a gray suit, Noah Briggs, Christopher's former head of security. Ava invited Angela to sit, then got straight to it. "Last week, the Oregon Post filed a request with Child Protective Services CPS to review your guardianship status, claiming Sophie's current environment is unsafe due to media harassment. CPS has formally opened a case." Angela went cold. "They want to take my daughter." "No," Ava said gently. "But they have the authority to investigate, and during that time to require a temporary co-guardian, someone with more stable material conditions, to ensure Sophie's interests." And Angela held her breath. "And who is that person?" Ava exhaled. "Christopher Martinez." For a moment, the room seemed to freeze. Angela shook her head with a disbelieving laugh. "That's impossible. He's gone. We don't speak." "He didn't file," Ava said. "His sister Charlotte did. She argues that because Christopher has supported you financially, he could serve as a temporary co-guardian during the investigation." Angela bowed her head as a hot, helpless anger rose. Charlotte's trying to force dependency this time with the law. Noah, silent until now, spoke. Mr. Martinez didn't know. When he found out, he was furious. He asked me and Ava to resolve it before it hits the press. Angela looked up. "Where is he?" Seattle, Noah replied. "But he'll be back tonight." By dusk, the sky had turned a deep violet. Angela returned to the apartment and found Sophie on the floor, coloring, singing to herself, blissfully unaware of the approaching storm. A knock at the door made Angela jump. She opened it. Christopher stood there, shirt still creased from a long flight hair ruffled by the wind. "You shouldn't be here," she said softly. "I know," he answered, voice low and tired. "But I'm not letting someone else decide your daughter's future for you." They looked at each other in silence. She could see the shadows beneath his eyes, and in their gray, a genuine worry, not the pity she had once feared. "Come in," she said, opening the door. The kitchen light fell over the small table where 2 cups of coffee cooled. Sophie was asleep. The two of them sat facing each other, quiet. Christopher slid a thin file toward her. "This is a temporary co-guardianship proposal." Ava prepared it. "It doesn't strip you of your rights as a mother. It's a legal shield, so CPS has no grounds to separate Sophie from you while they investigate." Angela stared at the paper. Her name and Christopher's were printed side by side, co-guardianship petition, with a neat line effective for 90 days. She drew a breath. "So on paper, you and I, Both have guardianship over Sophie. Yes, but you remain the primary decision maker. I'm a legal buffer if CPS tries to interfere. Angela gripped the edge of the table. Do you realize how this looks? Like I truly need you to save me? Not saving, Christopher said quietly. Protecting. What's the difference? The difference is, I'm doing it out of respect for you, not because I think you're weak. Angela lowered her gaze to avoid his. She knew he meant it. And maybe for the first time in years, someone wanted to stand with her, not above, not below, but at her side. After a long pause, she asked almost in a whisper, Are you sure you want to be dragged into this? It'll hurt your reputation. My reputation isn't worth more than your daughter's safety. Mine, she corrected gently, though her tone had softened. He smiled faintly, tilting his head. Yours, of course. I'm just lucky to help protect it. They looked at one another without speaking. Outside wind threaded through the trees. The leaves' soft rustle bore witness to a fragile and warm silence. That night, Angela signed. She didn't know whether she signed with her head or with trust. Perhaps both. Christopher didn't stay. He touched the file and said softly, I'll file it in the morning. It's going to be okay. When the door closed behind him, Angela stood for a long moment. On the table, the light gleamed on their signatures, two parallel lines of ink, not crossing yet, held within the same frame. 3 days later, the local court approved the CO guardianship. CPS suspended its review with the note, Child in stable environment safe and cared for. The news spread faster than they expected. The press pivoted from scandal to humane measure amid a media crisis. The name Angela Thompson trended without a chorus of judgment for the first time. That afternoon, Christopher stopped by the clinic just as Angela was suturing a stray cat. He stood quietly in the doorway, watching her work brown hair, tied back small frame, steady eyes. What are you doing here? She asked without looking up. Checking what the woman who turned a crisis in into a testament to self-respect looks like at work. And I think I should relearn when to keep my mouth shut, he said, half joking, half true. Angela smiled, the first genuine smile since the storm began. That evening, they sat by Oswego Lake where the tangle had started. No rain now, only a young moon silvering the water. Christopher poured her a little white wine and said nothing. Angela looked at the glass, then at him. If you hadn't dropped that wallet that day, then I'd be the rich man you never met, and you'd be the strong woman still walking through the rain. Do you regret it? No. Because that wallet led me to something worth keeping more than anything I own. She said nothing. Something inside her melted not into sudden love, but a rare sense of peace. Not the kind that comes from being helped, but the kind that comes from being understood. A breeze drifted by, touched with mint and wine. She glanced at him, a faint, steady smile. 3 months. We have 90 days as co-guardians. What then? Christopher's reply was soft as the wind. I don't know. But if you and Sophie still feel safe with me nearby by then maybe I won't leave. Angela bowed her head to hide a small smile. The Oswego night was quiet, and the lake glittered like 1,000 sleeping memories. Things they both knew, just not ready to name. Portland's late autumn sky was startlingly clear. Rare sunlight slipped through the bare branches, laying a thin silk of brightness across Oswego Lake. Angela sat on the porch, with a steaming cup of tea, eyes following Sophie as she chased the neighbor's puppy. The 3 months of temporary guardianship had passed as quickly as a breath, yet something inside her had changed. Since Christopher's return, life for mother and daughter had steadied. The press stopped lurking, CPS officially closed its file, and things at the clinic finally looked up. But that peace, Angela knew, was as fragile as the lake's mirror of sky. One small gust could shatter it. That morning, Ava Kendall called with news. Angela, you should see this. A link to a business daily arrived. The headline was Ice-Cold Beacon Foundation Accused of Media Manipulation. Are Christopher Martinez's humanitarian efforts truly transparent? Angela read line by line, feeling the chill spread. The article claimed the Beacon Foundation had cherry-picked medical debt cases to polish the benevolent image of Martinez Dynamics before an IPO. And this time, the target wasn't Christopher, but her. One of the selected cases was Angela Thompson, previously supported personally by Mr. Martinez. later becoming the legal guardian of her own daughter. Ava's voice was low. "They're trying to rope you into a formal inquiry. If you stay quiet, they'll define the story for you. The only way to fight this is to speak." Angela closed her eyes. Ava was right. But this time she didn't want to be a victim fronted by someone else. That afternoon, she stopped at a small cafe by the river and ordered a straight espresso. The roast in the warm air steadied her. She opened her laptop and began to write, not with emotion, but with the clarity of someone who knows exactly what she's doing. "I'm Angela Thompson, a veterinarian, a single mother. I'm not the face of anyone's campaign or a victim of someone's kindness. I'm proof that sometimes compassion exists, and it's doubted only because we're no longer used to believing in what's good." She chose each word carefully, the grind of debt, the hard years on the job, the beacon right off, without once naming Christopher. No apologies, no excuses, just the fact I wasn't picked by anyone. An independent review board approved me. And if someone wants to turn me into a pawn in a power game, sorry, they picked the wrong person. When the post went live, social media lit up. Thousands of comments and shares, single mothers, former patients, helped by the foundation, recounted their stories. Within 48 hours, a slight movement formed, had Beacon for Truth. 3 days later, the Oregon Post was forced to issue a formal statement, no evidence of conflict of interest between Angela and Martinez Dynamics. The older article vanished from the homepage. That same morning, Christopher called. "I just read your piece," he said, voice low with a warm edge. For the first time, someone didn't need me to protect them, and still made an entire system bow its head. Angela smiled, voice light as mist. For the first time, I wasn't afraid to tell the truth. "You don't know what you've done," he murmured. "Because of you, the Beacon Foundation received thousands of new applications. You salvaged our reputation." "Salvaged?" She laughed softly. "I just said what was right. The rest people saw for themselves." He was quiet for a beat, then, "Are you free tonight?" Angela hesitated. "Where are you, Seattle? But I think it's time to come home." That night, Portland looked like crystal. A tender cold drifted in the air, carrying dried grass and the far memory of rain. When Christopher pulled up, Angela was on the porch with a wool scarf around her neck. Yellow light caught her face, and her brown eyes glowed like embers. "You came," she said. "As promised," he replied. "When things were quiet." She smiled faintly. "They're never truly quiet." "That's all right," he said softly. "I can stand the storms as long as you're here." The words fell into the dark like warm water. Angela bowed her head, hiding a smile in her breath. They sat together on the steps beneath distant streetlights. Christopher spoke about Seattle, about the loneliness of a cold penthouse, the thud of files on a desk, and a heartbeat that stumbled whenever he thought of her. "I kept wondering, would I regret it if it all ended here?" His voice was rough, and the answer was yes, because I've never told you how much I admire you. Angela turned her gaze gentling. "You admire the woman who once called you a controller." "That's exactly why," he said with a small laugh. "You're the only one who looks me in the eye without caring who I am." Silence stretched taut between them like a freshly tuned string. They said nothing more, listening to wind through the pines and Oswego's moonlit ripples. Peace didn't last long. The next day, Ava called. "Angela, brace yourself. Elliot Voss, Christopher's rival, just filed for an independent inquiry into Beacon for alleged stock manipulation. They want him out as CEO." Angela froze. "They'll use me again?" "Very likely, and they have new evidence photos of you and Mr. Martinez by Oswego Lake last night." Angela held her breath. She instantly understood how a brush of shoulders or a look could be turned into a weapon. "I won't let them," she said flatly. Ava blinked over the line. "What are you going to do?" Angela stared out the window at a photo of herself and Sophie bathed in the morning sun. "This time, no one speaks for me." That afternoon, she walked into the Business Tribune, the paper that had smeared her wearing a white shirt. Small frame, steady eyes, bright and calm. The lead reporter, Laura Geller, looked startled. "I'm not here to threaten a lawsuit," Angela said. "I'm here to offer you a do-over. No script, no PR. If you want the truth about Martinez Dynamics, let me tell it from the perspective of someone who lost everything, and then learned that kindness still exists." Laura studied her, then smiled. I like a woman who knows she's driving the story. The interview ran 2 days later. No clickbait, no trumpet blast. Just one photo Angela outside the clinic. Sunlight across a composed face. The caption was spare. She doesn't need anyone to speak her heart. It spread faster than the old rumors. Christopher read it in a Seattle boardroom amid a brutal shareholder fight. He looked up, eyes steady, and said to the room, "You want to know why I'm keeping the Beacon Foundation, why I won't run? Read that article. The woman in that photo is why I still believe this world hasn't lost its humanity." The vote flipped. Voss lost. Martinez Dynamics kept control. That evening, as Christopher returned to Portland, a fine rain fell the twin of the night they first met. He came to the clinic door and said nothing. He lifted the newspaper with her photo, a saw flickering under the light. "You won," Angela said softly. "No," he answered, stepping closer. "We won. You taught me that the loudest voice isn't the truest. Sometimes it's strong enough to be silent when it matters." She looked at him, eyes deep as the lake under rain. "And you taught me," she said, her voice warming, "that not every miracle is an illusion. Some are simply someone believing we deserve another chance at life." A breeze lifted the hem of her coat, and the rain beaded on his shoulders. They stood facing each other in that fine falling veil. Two people from opposite worlds, now only a breath apart. The storm had passed, but the feeling, like Oswego's slow-rising swell, was gathering, waiting for its moment to break into truth. The first December rain fell softly over the streets around Oswego Lake, the air laced with the scent of wet earth and pine. Angela pulled her coat close and stood by the window of the small cafe on the lakeshore. The weather was chilly, and inside her was a quiet she couldn't quite name. 3 weeks had passed since her interview had turned public opinion around. The corporate battle had ended. Christopher kept his position, and she, no longer a victim in anyone's eyes, was free. Yet the calm after the storm left Angela feeling strangely adrift. Since then, Christopher had been busier. He flew to Seattle, constantly meetings, stretching past midnight dawn flights with no time for warning. His messages still arrived regularly, brief and gentle. "Have you eaten? Don't let Sophie stay up late. I miss Oswego mornings when you still carry the scent of coffee." But none of them said when he would be back. As Angela prepared for surgery that morning, Ava stepped in with a grave look. Christopher's private plane had an accident. They made an emergency landing in the mountains of northern Washington. He's safe, not in critical danger, but the press doesn't know yet. "I think you should get to the hospital before this leaks." The world froze in front of Angela's eyes. The room went soundless save for the pounding of her heart. She left the clinic without remembering how she even got to the car. Seattle was awash in white rain. At St. Helena Hospital, hallways smelled of antiseptic and echoed with the tap of medical shoes. Ava led her past rows of closed rooms and stopped before a door guarded by 2 security staff. "He's resting. But if anyone should be allowed in..." "It's you," Ava said softly and slipped away. Angela took a deep breath and set her hand on the door handle. The room was dim and clean rain, tapping gently on the window. Christopher lay there with bandages wrapped around his shoulder, his face pale but his breathing steady. On the bedside table, a phone, a notebook, and a framed photo, her and Sophie by the lake tucked in silver. Angela moved closer and sat beside him. The mingled smells of medicine rain and him tightened her chest. She took his hand, cold and stone still. "You really know how to scare people breathless," she murmured as if to a dream. "You always think you can take on the whole world. Turns out, you're human." Christopher didn't answer. His eyelids fluttered, then opened. He looked at her gray eyes washed with blue, exhausted yet warming with tenderness. "You came," he rasped. "Were you expecting someone else?" She replied, trying to hide the tremble in her voice. "No," he smiled faintly, then winced. "I just didn't think you'd leave work to be here." Angela studied him, her gaze a mix of reproach and worry. "Did you think I'd stay at the clinic and wait to read about your crash in the news?" His fingers tightened around hers. "I didn't want you to be afraid." "But I was," she said, voice catching. "From the moment Ava called, I was more afraid than ever." They fell quiet. Outside, the rain kept its rhythm. In the muted light, Angela took in the scrapes on his wrist, and the bruise on his cheek, he sighed. He was still Christopher, the proud, strong man, now fragile as a child. By late afternoon, the doctors left them alone. Christopher rested his head against the pillow gaze drifting to the window. "The plane started losing altitude right after takeoff," he said slowly. "That feeling, like falling into a bottomless void. I thought if this is the end, my only regret would be not saying what I needed to say." Angela asked softly, "What thing?" "That I love you." The words landed light as a breath and stunned her. Not because she hadn't suspected, but because hearing him say it swept away everything she had tried to outrun. Doubt's old wounds, the line between their two worlds, none mattered. Angela looked up at him for a long moment. "You don't have to say that just because you almost died." "I'm not saying it because I almost died," Christopher answered steady. "I'm saying it because I almost lost you." A tear slid onto her hand before she could brush it away. She let out a tight little laugh. "You are impossible, always choosing the one moment that makes it impossible to refuse you." He held her hand, his thumb tracing gentle circles. "You don't have to answer. Just know that everything I've done, from protecting Sophie to letting you stand alone, was because I want to be worthy of you." Angela leaned down, touched the edge of the bandage on his shoulder, and whispered, "You always were. I just wasn't ready to believe it." Christopher chuckled softly, his eyes dissolving into hers. "Then believe it now." A week later, he was discharged. The doctors prescribed several weeks of rest, and he chose to spend them in Portland. On his first morning back, he walked into her clinic. Everyone froze at the sight of the billionaire in a simple jacket carrying a basket of cat food. Angela looked at him and sighed. "Trying to make a scene? Or do you want to be a vet tech today?" "Both," he said blandly, setting the basket down. "I figured I could start by learning how to wait." From then on, he came every day sometimes just to read Tidy Up or bring coffee for the team. No one said it aloud, but the small rooms seemed brighter whenever he stepped in. Angela slowly grew used to his presence, awkward at first, then warm. Once during a break, she asked, "Don't you get restless?" "Men like you don't sit still." "I used to think so," Christopher said, "until I realized watching you work is its own kind of calm." One evening after Sophie fell asleep, Angela sat on the porch knitting. Christopher draped a coat over her shoulders. "Tomorrow I have a meeting in Seattle," he said quietly. "I might be gone a few days, but I don't want to leave without saying this." Angela looked up. Moonlight traced the edges of his hair, outlining tiredness threaded with resolve. "You've always seemed strong to me," she said. "But every time I look at you, I see a loneliness in your eyes that nothing quite touches." Christopher was silent. After a moment, he said softly, "I've stood alone for too long. Since you standing alone have become the frightening part." Angela set down the yarn and turned to him. "I was afraid too. Not of being alone, of trusting the wrong person. And now..." She held his gaze in answer and a promise in one. "Now I'm afraid only of not being brave enough to keep you." He brushed her fingers and closed his hand around hers. "I won't let that happen. Because this time, I'm the one who stays." Outside, a fine rain began to fall, steeping the air in mint and warm wood. Angela rested her head on his shoulder and closed her eyes. In their mingled breath was something peaceful and perilous, like a small flame in a rainy night smoldering, but never going out. She knew that the world would rush back in when morning came with news opinions and pressures they could never entirely avoid. But tonight, there were only two of them in the little house by the lake, and the fragile gap between love and fear was slowly disappearing. Winter arrived earlier than usual. Portland wrapped itself in thick fog. The trees lining Oswego Lake seemed asleep in the chill. Angela strolled along the path to the clinic gray coat draped over her shoulders. The smell of coffee drifted from the corner shop, warm yet oddly hollow. It had been nearly a month since Christopher's return. His presence had changed her life quieter now, but also more fragile. He still came to the clinic every morning with a low foam cappuccino and that familiar smile. Outsiders would assume they were a couple. But between them, nothing had been defined since the night she rested her head on his shoulder in the rain. Perhaps they both knew sometimes a single confirmation is enough to shatter the makeshift peace they'd fought to keep. That morning, as she unlocked the door, Ava was already there, her expression graver than usual. "Angela, we need to talk, now." Angela nodded and led Ava into the empty clinic. She poured 2 cups of tea, steam rising thin and fragrant. Ava opened her briefcase and spoke softly but heavily. "Charlotte Martinez Price has sent a formal notice. She's moving to force Christopher out as chair of the Beacon Foundation, and the grounds she's using are you." Angela fell silent. "Me again." "This time it's more serious," Ava said. "Charlotte has a copy of the temporary TO guardianship paperwork between you and Christopher. She claims it violates the Foundation's charter because it creates a romantic conflict leading to financial favoritism. She's pushing for an early board vote to oust him." Angela leaned back hollow inside. Another power play. Not just a play, Ava held her gaze. It's the end game. If she succeeds, Christopher loses his influence in the company. And I don't think she'll stop there. She could move to rescind decisions he's signed, including your medical debt forgiveness. Angela let out a small, knowing laugh from someone who realizes she may have to fight from the start again. "She thinks I'll sit quietly." Ava's smile was slight. She'd seen Angela stand in storms before. "I know you won't." That afternoon, Angela drove to the Martinez estate in Lakeview Heights. The hilltop house was grand and cold, like the woman waiting inside. Charlotte greeted her with a composed look. "You're quick, I assume Ava told you." Angela slipped off her coat and stood tall. "I'm not here to beg you to stop. I'm here to ask why you hate me so much." Charlotte's mouth curved as she poured tea with unhurried hands. "Hate is too heavy a word, Angela. I dislike people who make my brother forget his place. What place heir to a multi-billion-dollar company responsible for thousands of employees? Someone who must put reason before feeling." Angela met her eye's voice and even gaze, which was cold. "Maybe that's why you don't understand. Sometimes feeling is the only thing that keeps a person from becoming a monster." Charlotte's pause was a knife's length. "You think I'm a monster?" "I think you once knew how to love, Angela," said slowly. "Then you chose to lose it to keep power. Christopher chose the opposite." The air thickened. After a long silence, Charlotte exhaled, her voice smaller. "My brother loved once, Angela. A woman named Elise. She died in an accident he believes was his fault. After that, he never spoke of love again. Until you." Angela froze. "What did you say?" Charlotte looked straight at her. "I don't hate you for changing him. I hate that you made him believe he deserves happiness when he shouldn't." A chill slid down Angela's spine. "You don't get to decide who deserves their happiness." "No," Charlotte said softly, "but I have the right to keep my family from reliving a tragedy." When Angela left the estate, the rain had turned heavy. She sat in the car watching the crisscross of drops on the glass mind in turmoil. Elise haunted her. So behind Christopher's composure and reason, there was an old wound that had never closed. She didn't sleep that night. At 2 a.m., her phone rang. "Christopher, you're awake." His voice was rough, as if he'd just landed. "I heard," she said. "About Charlotte. About Elise." He was silent. She heard wind through the line, then his voice low and sad. "I figured she'd tell you." "Was she right?" "Half right," he said. "Elise was my fiancée. The accident happened while I was driving. She died in my arms. I promised myself I would never love again, because loving someone means giving them the power to make you lose everything." Angela said nothing. "But then I met you," Christopher went on softly. "And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of losing. I was only afraid you wouldn't believe I deserved to be loved." Her throat tightened. "You do. Maybe you were wrong once, but no one should live a lifetime on parole." "I'm trying to believe you," he said. "But Charlotte won't stop. She doesn't want me on a path she calls emotionally risky. I'm only afraid that if I keep going, you'll be the one who gets hurt." "Christopher," she said, "I'm not Elise." "I know. That doesn't make me less afraid." His voice faded into the lines smaller, then gone. Angela sat still, staring into the fog-draped street. She knew the media would not break their love, but a past could undo it he hadn't revealed. The next day, Charlotte convened an emergency Beacon board meeting. Everyone was present except Christopher, who was out of town resolving final matters. Angela stopped in the lobby before the heavy double doors. Ava hurried up and whispered, "You shouldn't go in. It's a closed session." "It's all right," Angela said quietly. "I only need 3 minutes." The doors opened. Every face turned. Charlotte arched a brow. "Ms. Thompson, this is not a place for outsiders." Angela smiled, calm and clear. "I'm not here as an outsider. I'm here as someone who benefited from this foundation's compassion, and as proof that kindness cannot be strangled by those who speak in the name of ethics." She stepped forward and set a file on the table. "This is a list of more than 200 patients whom I and a group of volunteer doctors have personally fundraised for over the last 2 months using the model Christopher pioneered. I didn't do it to prove he's innocent. I did it to show that if a man can inspire others to do good, he deserves trust, not removal." The room was pin-drop silent. Charlotte's fingers tightened around her glass. Something flickered in her eyes. Angela glanced around, voice softening. "If you want a charity without feeling, I'm sorry you'll end up with a spreadsheet without a soul." Then she turned and walked out. No one stopped her. That afternoon, Christopher called. His voice was low, relieved. "The vote's over. I'm staying." Angela smiled, eyes stinging. "So Charlotte didn't win." "No, but she didn't lose either. She just realized some victories cost the person you care about." "What do you mean?" "She resigned from the board. Voluntarily." Angela was quiet for a long time. Then softly, maybe in the end, she still knows how to love. "Maybe," Christopher said. "But I know one thing for certain, I love you." Angela laughed under her breath, her eyes shining as the light faded. Outside, the season's first snow began to fall. And for the first time, she didn't feel cold. Because she knew that despite wounds and tempests, 2 once fearful hearts had found a place to heal. A love that didn't need proof, only the courage to exist. Snow blanketed Portland on Christmas Eve. The city shimmered beneath the soft glow of thousands of lights strung along the avenues. Oswego Lake had frozen into a thin mirror reflecting a pale winter sky, and within that stillness, Angela felt as if she were living inside a dream. Sophie ran circles around the small Christmas tree in the living room, her laughter bright and clear. Angela sat by the window and wrapped around a cup of hot cocoa, while Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas played softly in the background. She had never imagined a winter so peaceful. No reporters calling, no fear of being misunderstood, no wary stares when she stepped outside. Only one thing disturbed her calm Christopher. He still hadn't come home. 3 weeks earlier, after the decisive meeting at the Beacon Foundation, he'd been invited to join a humanitarian project in Switzerland. He left in a rush, only managing to say, "When the snow falls in Portland, I'll come back." Now the snow had fallen, but the door remained silent. Angela smiled faintly, feeling her heart caught between 2 beats, half believing, half afraid. Just then, Ava called. "Turn on the TV. Global Business is broadcasting something about Christopher." Angela reached for the remote. The moment his image filled the screen, her chest tightened, black suit, steady eyes. Behind him stretched the stage of a Geneva conference hall filled with delegates from international charities. His voice, low and resonant, carried through the broadcast. "I used to think compassion was a luxury in a world ruled by power and profit. Until one woman taught me that if kindness needs to be proven, it's already lost its meaning." Angela's hands trembled. She set the cup down. The only sound in the room was her heartbeat. "Her name is Angela Thompson," he continued, gaze fixed on the camera. "And today, I dedicate this International Medical Relief Fund project to her. The woman who taught me that strength doesn't define victory, but kindness defines the kind of world worth living in." The hall erupted in applause. Angela couldn't stop her tears. That night, Portland was still cold, but something inside her had begun to thaw. She stepped out onto the porch and looked up at the sky. Snowflakes drifted endlessly, soft and slow. She smiled, whispering to the wind. "You kept your promise, Christopher. You came back in your own way." 3 days later, early morning, came a knock at the door. Angela opened it, and the winter air rushed in carrying the scent of pine mint and faint wood smoke. Christopher stood there. No coat, just a gray turtleneck hair dusted with snow, eyes gleaming as if no distance had ever existed. "You're supposed to be in Geneva," she said, trembling. "I was," he replied with a small smile, "long enough to realize where I should be instead." She opened her mouth to speak, but he stepped forward and pulled her into his arms before she could. The embrace was so warm it seemed to stop time. His breath touched her neck, deep and shaking, and she, instead of resisting, closed her eyes and melted into him. "I thought I'd be fine leaving," he whispered. "But I learned that everywhere without you is just a temporary stop." Angela looked up at him, eyes glistening. "You have the whole world, Christopher. Why choose someone like me?" He brushed his fingers along her cheek. "Because I don't need the whole world. I need one place that reminds me I'm still human." The words erased every remaining distance. She smiled, resting her head against his chest. "Your world must be so loud. Then I'll learn to love the noise as long as you're in it." That afternoon, they took Sophie for a walk by the lake. The little girl ran ahead, throwing handfuls of snow at them, laughing. Angela watched her, then glanced at Christopher, her heart brimming with quiet contentment. "You know," she said, "the first time I met you, I thought you were the coldest man I'd ever known. And now?" "Now," she replied softly, "I think you were hiding a heart too tired to believe in goodness." Christopher smiled, eyes tracing the lake's silver reflection. "Maybe, but you made it beat again." That evening, after Sophie fell asleep, they sat by the fireplace. The flames cast a golden glow as Angela leaned into him, listening to his heart's slow, steady rhythm. "Are you afraid?" she asked. "That's what we have too beautiful to last." Christopher paused, then answered quietly. "Yes, but I'd still choose the first if I had to choose between a brief happiness and a long, empty life." Angela smiled faintly. "I don't want it to be brief." Then he said, taking her hand, "Let's make it last. Not by counting the years, but by how we live each day." The firelight flickered across their faces, casting two silhouettes that leaned closer together, as if the world outside might break that fragile moment if they moved apart. A week later, they attended the grand opening of Angela's new clinic, Hope and Pause, a place for those who couldn't afford care, but refused to give up on their beloved pets. When the ceremony ended, a young reporter asked Christopher Mr. Martinez, "What inspired you to fund this project?" He glanced at Angela, eyes warm. "Because I once owed a woman a promise. I told her I'd use my power to do something meaningful, not just profitable." Angela smiled softly. "You didn't have to say that out loud." "I wasn't saying it for them," he replied. "I was saying it for myself so I don't forget." That night they returned home. Snow fell thicker than before. Angela stood on the balcony watching flakes swirl under the streetlights, then turned to him. "If one day all this disappeared, the fame, the company, the headlines, what would you have left?" Christopher looked at her for a long time before answering, his voice low, like a vow. "I'd still have the only thing that can't be bought, lost or faked. You." Angela pressed her lips together, smiling slowly like a flower blooming in snow. "Then, maybe for the first time in my life, I'm not afraid anymore." The wind brushed her hair, and he stepped closer, bending down to kiss her, a slow, careful kiss, as if afraid to wake the dream. Snow kept falling. The firelight from inside spilled through the window, reflecting their embrace against the white sky. And somewhere in that winter, two people who had survived the storms of their hearts finally found what they'd lost long ago. Not perfect happiness, but the peace that comes from daring to love again. 3 months later, Portland welcomed spring with the scent of cherry blossoms drifting along the avenues, and mornings so clear that the sky seemed to reflect perfectly in the surface of Oswego Lake. Angela led Sophie out of the house, a steaming cup of coffee in her hand, listening to the girl chatter about her upcoming school performance. She smiled, feeling as if the past year's storms had dissolved into nothing more than a dream lost in the early mist. Her life was strangely steady now. The Hope and Pause clinic was always full, and many of those who had once received her help had returned as volunteers. Every afternoon, as the sunset spilled across the lake, she saw her own reflection there, the woman who had once been exhausted by heartbreak, now standing calmly in the quiet joy she had built for herself. But one thing still stirred her heart. Christopher had left Portland. At the start of February, he'd gone on what the media called the Beacon Foundation's global expansion strategy. This time, no one knew when he would return. There were no promises, no goodbyes, only a small note tucked into the notebook she carried everywhere. If you see a man standing by the lake one day, don't call out. Let me be the one who finds you first. That morning, Ava stopped by the clinic. Have you read the news? She asked, her eyes gleaming with something unreadable. Angela shook her head, smiling. I've stopped keeping up with headlines. Ava laid a newspaper on the desk. A photo of Christopher standing before the new Beacon Foundation building in Europe was on the front page. The caption read, Billionaire Martinez announces successor for U.S. Division, Angela Thompson. Angela froze. Ava, you're kidding. I'm not. The papers were filed last month. The board approved it unanimously. You were his first and only nomination, and the only person he wrote a letter of recommendation for by hand. Angela opened the envelope attached. Inside was a letter written in his firm, slanted handwriting. You once told me that true happiness isn't about having everything, but finding enough peace to share what you have. I chose you not out of love, but out of faith, because no one understands the value of compassion more deeply than you. If you accept this will be the one thing I don't need you to say yes to, just live it. Angela closed the letter softly, emotions rising in her chest. Memories flooded back the night they first met in the rain, their kiss in winter. His eyes when he whispered, I love you in the hospital. Each small moment now formed a thread weaving a long path that had quietly led her here. That afternoon, she went to Oswego Lake. The water shimmered under the breeze, the willow branches trembling slightly. At the dock, the exact spot where they had once said goodbye, the old wood still bore the dark stains of time. Angela stood there for a long while, her heartbeat blending with the gentle rhythm of the waves. A child ran past, dropping a paper kite painted with blue wings. Angela bent to pick it up, and when she looked up, she saw him. A gray overcoat, dark hair, a slow, steady stride. Her heart stopped. Christopher stood there smiling, not brightly, but with a calm that seemed to light the air itself. You said you'd find me first, she whispered, her voice trembling. And I kept my word, he said as he came closer. And you kept your faith, didn't you? She didn't answer. Tears welled up and slipped down her cheeks, carried away by the wind. He reached out, brushing them gently from her face with warm fingertips. I didn't come back to talk about work, he said softly. I came back because I finally understood every project. Every success means nothing if I have no one to share it with. Angela laughed through her tears, her voice shaking but tender. Then, what do you want to share now? The sunrise of the rest of my life, he said. If you'll let me. She looked up at him, the last light of sunset reflecting in his eyes. No promises, no explanations, just a quiet nod. And in that moment, the world seemed to stop, leaving only two people, a lakeside dock, and a love that had endured every storm to reach the shore of peace. They sat together on the porch that night, watching the lights shimmer over the lake. Sophie ran out and climbed onto Christopher's lap, laughing. Angela watched them, her heart full. You've changed, she said softly. I haven't, Christopher smiled. I've just become myself again, the man who once believed happiness comes from loving someone the right way. Angela tilted her head, her eyes warm in the firelight. And do you think you've learned to love correctly? He met her gaze, gentle, steady. I don't know what's right or wrong. I know I need nothing else when I look at you. She chuckled, though her heart was still. Maybe love didn't need grand declarations, only two people willing to keep walking toward each other no matter how many times they'd stumbled. The next morning, dawn stretched gold across Oswego Lake. Angela opened the window and breathed in the crisp new air. Christopher stood on the porch, coffee in hand, gazing at the horizon. When she joined him, he turned and smiled. I used to think that if everything collapsed, I'd come back here where I found you. She leaned against his shoulder. And I used to think that if the world ever grew quiet, I'd stay here where you found me. They said nothing more, watching the horizon bloom pink with morning light. The lake lay still, a perfect mirror. And in its reflection, they saw themselves not two wounded souls anymore, but two people who had learned to heal each other. "If one day you have to start over," Christopher said softly, "I want you to remember wherever you are, I'll be the man standing by the lake waiting for you." Angela smiled, her voice barely a whisper. "You won't have to wait, because this time I'll be the one who comes looking." He paused, then chuckled, squeezing her hand. The morning breeze carried the scent of blossoms, coffee, and peace. The dawn burned bright. A new chapter began, not loud, not dramatic, just enough for anyone who had ever loved, lost, and feared to understand. Sometimes happiness doesn't come from having, but from believing you deserve it. If you love dramatic romance stories like this, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and leave a comment below so you won't miss the next heartfelt chapter.